7 days after her husband's funeral, Amara's mother-in-law threw her out into the pouring rain. They laughed at her because the will said Amara only got an old, broken-down building in a forgotten town. But her mother-in-law and sister-in-law got the big mansion and the family business. That same night, dragging a wet suitcase and a broken heart, Amara walked toward the place her husband left her. She had no idea that inside those crumbling walls, she would find something that would change her life forever. But before we begin, imagine you are listening to this story on your favorite YouTube channel. Drop a comment telling me what city you are listening from, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe so I can keep bringing you stories like this one. Now, Amara's true story began 7 days after Julian's funeral. It had been 1 week since they put Julian's body in the ground, but the air inside the Duval mansion was not sad. It was heavy and tight, like a rope around your chest. Nobody in that house seemed to be crying for Julian. Instead, everyone was waiting for the reading of the will. Amara sat on a fancy velvet sofa that felt cold and unfriendly. She wore a simple black dress and a thin shawl that made her almost disappear into the shadows of the enormous living room. Her hands were folded in her lap, and she tried very hard to breathe slowly. Sitting across from her were 2 women who hated her. The first was Madeline, her mother-in-law. She was a tall woman with silver hair pulled back so tight it made her face look sharp like a knife. She wore a black designer dress that cost more than most people's cars. Diamond earrings sparkled on her ears, and a golden bracelet hung from her thin wrist. The second was Celeste, her sister-in-law. She was younger than Madeline, but just as mean. Her lips were painted dark red, and her eyes moved around the room like a hungry cat watching a mouse. She also wore black, but her dress was short and expensive, and new rings glittered on every finger. Both women were dressed for a funeral, but there was no sadness in their eyes. Only greed, only hunger, only the look of people waiting to get what they wanted. From the very first day Amara married Julian, she had been the daughter-in-law nobody wanted. She came from a simple family. Her father worked in a factory, and her mother cleaned houses. She had no famous last name. She had no rich relatives. She had nothing that Madeline thought was important. "You are not good enough for my son," Madeline had told her on her wedding day. "You will never be one of us." And for 5 years, Madeline made sure Amara never forgot those words. The front door of the mansion opened with a loud creak. Everyone turned to look. A man walked in. He was tall and thin, with gray hair and glasses that sat on the tip of his nose. He wore a stiff black suit and carried a leather briefcase that looked very heavy. This was Mr. Harrison, Julian's personal lawyer. Amara had only seen him a few times before, at family meetings and business dinners. As soon as Madeline and Celeste saw him, they sat up straight. Their eyes got big and bright, like animals who smell food nearby. Mr. Harrison walked slowly to an armchair facing the 3 women. He sat down and looked at each of them, one by one. When his eyes landed on Amara, she felt something strange. His face showed pity, and something else she could not understand. Something like discomfort, like he knew a secret he did not want to tell. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Madeline, Miss Celeste, Mrs. Amara," he said. His voice was flat and careful. "I am here because Mr. Julian asked me to read his last will and testament. Everything I am about to read was signed and made legal by Mr. Julian himself." Amara's heart began to pound so hard she could feel it in her throat. She was not hopping for money. She did not care about the mansion or the cars or the jewelry. All she wanted was to hear something kind, some small sign that Julian had loved her, some proof that their 5 years together had meant something to him. Mr. Harrison opened his briefcase and pulled out a large envelope sealed with red wax. He broke the seal carefully and took out several sheets of thick paper. Then he began to read. At first, it was all legal words that Amara did not understand. Long sentences about laws and courts and things that sounded like a foreign language. She lowered her eyes to her hands and tried to stay calm. Finally, Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "I will now read the main part," he said, "the distribution of assets." Madeline leaned forward. A small smile began to form on her lips. To my dear mother, Madeline Duval, Mr. Harrison read, I leave all of my shares in the Duval Foundation. This includes all the money, all the buildings, and all the business operations. I also leave her this mansion, with everything inside it, and I leave her 3 luxury cars registered under the company name. Celeste's eyes went wide. Madeline's small smile turned into a big, proud grin. They looked at each other with faces full of joy. They had won. They had gotten exactly what they wanted. Mr. Harrison continued reading. His voice got a little quieter. To my only sister, Celeste Duval, I leave my collection of real estate investments. This includes a luxury apartment in downtown Chicago. I also leave her all the money in her personal savings account. Celeste let out a happy squeal. She covered her mouth with her hand, but her eyes were dancing with excitement. Madeline turned to look at Amara. Her face was cruel and cold. Her eyes said words she did not need to speak out loud. You see, you are nothing. You have always been nothing. Amara felt her cheeks burning. It did not hurt that they got everything. What hurt was that her name had not been spoken even once. Had Julian really forgotten about her? Did she mean so little to him? Was she truly invisible, even in death? Mr. Harrison cleared his throat again. This time, his voice sounded tight and uncomfortable. And finally, he said slowly, to my beloved wife, Amara. Amara's ears started to ring. Beloved wife. Those 2 words hit her like a slap and a kiss at the same time. They hurt, but they also gave her a tiny drop of hope. I leave the only thing remaining from my grandfather's estate, Mr. Harrison read. An old building located on the outskirts of the city of Lyon. The full address is written in the attached papers. That is all. Silence. A silence so deep and so heavy that Amara could hear her own heartbeat. She could hear the rain hitting the windows. She could hear the clock ticking on the wall. That was all, an old building, nothing else. Celeste broke the silence with a sharp, ugly laugh. Just that, she asked. Her voice was full of poison. An old building, that's all she gets. Mr. Harrison swallowed hard. He looked down at his papers. The will also says, he added quietly, that all of Mr. Julian's personal bank accounts were emptied before he died. The money was used to pay off business debts. There is nothing else left to give. Then something terrible happened. Madeline started to laugh. Not a small laugh, not a quiet giggle. A big, loud, cruel laugh that bounced off the walls and filled the whole room. She laughed like someone had just told her the funniest joke in the world. An old building, she said between laughs. In Lyon, I don't even know where that is. It's probably full of rats and bugs and falling apart walls. Celeste joined in. The 2 women laughed together, and their laughter was like knives cutting into Amara's chest. Julian finally understood your place, Amara, Celeste said with a mean smile. In a broken-down shack far away from us, with the rats and the spiders, where you belong. Tears spilled from Amara's eyes before she could stop them. She was not crying about money. She did not care about money. She was crying because of the shame, the embarrassment, the cruelty. And the worst part? This whole terrible scene had been created by Julian, the man who promised to love her, the man who said he would protect her forever. Amara looked at Mr. Harrison. Her eyes begged him for help, for an explanation, for something that would make this nightmare make sense. But the lawyer was already shoving papers back into his briefcase. He would not look at her face. My work here is done, he said quickly. I will leave a copy of the will with Mrs. Madeline. Good day. He stood up, gave a tiny bow, and almost ran out of the room. The door slammed shut behind him. As soon as he was gone, Madeline stopped laughing. Her face changed in 1 second. The smile disappeared. Her eyes became hard and cold like 2 pieces of ice. She looked at Amara the way someone looks at garbage on the street. You heard him, Amara, Madeline said. Her voice was sharp and mean. You are nobody here anymore. Julian only left you a pile of old bricks. Why are you still sitting in my house? Amara's mouth fell open. She could barely speak. But this is my home too, she whispered. I lived here with Julian for 5 years. This is where we That was before, Celeste interrupted. She stood up and pointed at Amara. Now this house belongs to us, and we do not want you here, not for one more minute. Madeline stood up too. She walked toward Amara slowly, like a snake moving toward a frightened mouse. Do you know what I think? Madeline said softly. I think you brought bad luck to this family. Ever since Julian married you, the business started having problems, and you could not even give him a child. 5 years of marriage and not one baby. You are useless, Amara, completely useless. The words hit Amara like punches. Each one hurt more than the last. She and Julian had tried so hard to have a baby. They had prayed and hoped and dreamed, but it never happened. And now Madeline was using that pain as a weapon. Please, Amara whispered. It's raining outside. At least let me stay until morning. I have nowhere to go tonight. Madeline smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who enjoys watching others suffer. The rain is not my problem, she said. You have 30 minutes to pack your things and leave. If you are still here after that, I will call the police and have you removed like the trespasser you are. 30 minutes, Amara gasped, but I can't. 29 minutes now, Celeste said, looking at her watch. I suggest you start packing. Amara stood up on shaking legs. Tears were streaming down her face, but she did not make a sound. She would not give them the satisfaction of hearing her cry. She walked out of the living room and climbed the stairs to the bedroom she had shared with Julian. Every step felt heavy, like she was walking through deep water. The bedroom still smelled like Julian. His cologne, his shampoo, the special tea he liked to drink before bed. Amara stood in the doorway for a moment, remembering all the nights they had spent talking and laughing in this room. Now it was all gone, like it had never happened. She pulled a small suitcase from the closet. It was old and worn, the same suitcase she had brought when she first moved into this mansion as a new bride. She had not needed it since then. Madeline always said it was too ugly and cheap to be seen in the Duval house. Amara opened her drawers and started packing. She did not take much. A few dresses, some underwear, a warm sweater, a photograph of her and Julian on their wedding day. She looked at the photo for a long moment. Julian was smiling in it. He looked so happy, so full of life. His arm was around her waist, and his eyes were looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Why did you do this to me? She whispered to the photograph. Why did you leave me with nothing? But the photograph did not answer. It just smiled back at her, frozen in a moment that felt like 100 years ago. A loud knock on the door made her jump. 15 minutes, Celeste shouted from the hallway. Hurry up, rat. Amara zipped up her suitcase with shaking hands. She took one last look around the bedroom. Then she walked out and closed the door behind her. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, Madeline and Celeste were waiting for her. They stood by the front door with their arms crossed, watching her like guards watching a prisoner. Finally, Madeline said, I thought you would never leave. Amara walked toward the door. Her suitcase wheels squeaked against the marble floor. The sound echoed through the empty hallway like a sad song. When she reached the door, Celeste grabbed her arm. Wait, Celeste said. What's that around your neck? Amara's hand flew to her throat. She was wearing a small gold necklace with a tiny diamond pendant. Julian had given it to her on their first anniversary. It's mine, Amara said. Julian gave it to me. Julian is dead, Celeste said coldly. And that necklace belonged to our grandmother. It's a family heirloom, take it off. No, Amara said. Her voice was stronger now. Julian gave this to me, it's mine. Celeste's eyes flashed with anger. She reached for the necklace, but Amara stepped back. Let her keep it, Madeline said suddenly. Both Amara and Celeste looked at her in surprise. Madeline smiled her cruel smile again. It's probably fake anyway. Julian always was cheap when it came to her. Celeste laughed and let go of Amara's arm. You're right, Mother. Let her have her cheap little trinket. It matches her cheap little life. Madeline opened the front door. Cold rain blew into the house, spraying Amara's face. Outside, the world was dark and gray. The rain was falling so hard it looked like a curtain of water. "Goodbye, Amara," Madeline said. "Don't ever come back." And with that, she pushed Amara out the door. Amara stumbled on the wet steps and almost fell. Her suitcase tipped over and landed in a puddle. By the time she picked it up, she was already soaked. The rain pounded on her head and shoulders like tiny fists. Behind her, she heard the door slam shut. Then she heard laughter. Madeline and Celeste were laughing at her through the window. Amara stood in the rain for a long moment. She was wet and cold and alone. Her husband was dead. Her home was gone. And the only thing she had left in the world was an old building in a town she had never heard of. She started walking. She did not know where she was going. She just knew she had to get away from this place. Away from the laughter. Away from the cruelty. Away from the life she thought she knew. The rain kept falling. The night kept getting darker. And Amara kept walking, dragging her wet suitcase behind her, one step at a time. She did not know it yet, but this was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning. Chapter 2, The Journey to Lyon. The bus station was cold and almost empty. Amara sat on a hard plastic chair in the corner, her wet clothes sticking to her skin. A small puddle had formed under her suitcase. The fluorescent lights above her head buzzed and flickered, making everything look pale and sick. It was nearly midnight. The last bus to Lyon would leave in 20 minutes. Amara had counted the money in her purse 3 times. She had $47.63. The bus ticket cost $42. That would leave her with only $5.63. Not enough for food, not enough for a hotel, not enough for anything, really. But she had no choice. She had to get to Lyon. She had to see this building that Julian had left her. Maybe she could sell it. Maybe she could find a job in the town. Maybe there was something there that could help her start over. Or maybe there was nothing. Maybe it was just an empty, broken building full of rats and spiders, just like Madeline had said. Amara shook her head. She could not think like that. Not now, not when thinking like that meant giving up. An old woman sat down on the chair next to her. She was small and round, with white hair tucked under a colorful scarf. She carried a big canvas bag filled with what looked like vegetables. "You look like you've had a rough night, dear," the old woman said kindly. Amara tried to smile, but it came out wrong, more like a grimace. "You could say that," she said quietly. The old woman nodded like she understood everything. "Sometimes life pushes us down into the mud," she said. "But you know what? The mud is where flowers grow. Don't forget that." Amara did not know what to say. The old woman's words seemed strange, but also comforting, like a warm blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "Thank you," Amara whispered. The old woman patted her hand. "Lyon, huh? I heard you ask for a ticket. That's a nice little area outside the city. Lots of old buildings there. Lots of history." "Do you know it?" Amara asked, suddenly interested. "I passed through once many years ago," the old woman said. "There used to be a beautiful textile factory there, made the finest fabrics in the whole country, but that was a long time ago, before everything changed." A textile factory. Amara remembered something Julian had told her once, early in their marriage. His grandfather had owned a textile business before the family moved into charity work, but he had never talked about it much. Whenever she asked questions, he would change the subject. "What happened to it?" Amara asked. "The factory." The old woman shrugged. "I don't know, dear. Things close. People move on. That's how life works." A voice came over the loudspeaker. "Last call for bus 47 to Lyon. Now boarding at gate 3. Amara stood up quickly. "That's me," she said. "Thank you for talking to me. It helped." The old woman smiled, and her whole face crinkled like a happy raisin. "Remember what I said, dear. Flowers in the mud. You'll find your way." Amara grabbed her suitcase and hurried toward gate 3. When she looked back to wave goodbye, the old woman was gone. Her chair was empty, like she had never been there at all. Amara shivered. She told herself the woman had just walked away quickly, but something about the whole conversation felt strange, like a dream, like a message meant just for her. She shook off the feeling and got on the bus. The bus was old and smelled like diesel and stale coffee. Only a few other passengers were on board. A young man with headphones sleeping against the window, a tired-looking mother with a baby wrapped in a blanket, and an elderly couple who held hands and whispered to each other. Amara found a seat near the back and sat down. The fabric was scratchy and a spring poked into her leg, but she did not care. She was just grateful to be out of the rain, to be going somewhere, anywhere. The bus rumbled to life and pulled out of the station. Through the dirty window, Amara watched the city lights slide past, the tall buildings, the glowing signs, the empty streets wet with rain. Somewhere out there was the Duval mansion. Somewhere out there, Madeline and Celeste were probably drinking champagne and celebrating their victory, probably laughing about how they had thrown out the worthless widow. Amara turned away from the window. She could not think about them anymore. It hurt too much. Instead, she thought about Julian. She remembered the day they met. It was at a charity event for homeless children. Amara had been volunteering, serving food and cleaning tables. Julian had been there as a guest, representing his family's foundation. He was not like the other rich people at the party. He did not look down at her or ignore her. When she accidentally spilled soup on his expensive shoes, he laughed and said, "Don't worry, I never liked these shoes anyway." They talked for 3 hours that night, about books and music and dreams and fears. By the end of the evening, Amara felt like she had known him her whole life. 3 months later, they were married. Madeline had been furious. She said Julian was making a terrible mistake. She said Amara was a gold digger, a social climber, a nobody trying to become a somebody. But Julian did not listen. He said he loved Amara. He said she was the kindest, most genuine person he had ever met. He said he did not care about money or status or family names. He just wanted to be happy. And for a while they were happy, really, truly happy. But then Julian got sick. It started small, headaches that would not go away, tiredness that sleep could not fix. Then came the tests, the doctors, the long hospital stays. Julian never told her how bad it really was. He always said he was getting better. He always said everything would be fine. He always had a smile for her, even when his face was pale and thin. Now Amara wondered if he had been lying the whole time. If he had known, he was dying and just did not want to tell her. If he had spent his last months planning something she did not understand. Why else would he leave her an old building in the middle of nowhere? Why else would he leave everything else to the family who hated her? Unless it was not about the building at all. The thought came to her suddenly, like a flash of lightning in the dark. What if Julian had left her the building for a reason? What if there was something there? Something important, something he wanted her to find. It seemed crazy, like something out of a movie, but the more Amara thought about it, the more it made sense. Julian was smart. He was always planning things, thinking 3 steps ahead of everyone else, and he knew his family. He knew how cruel they could be. He would not have just left her with nothing, not if he truly loved her. Maybe the building was not a punishment. Maybe it was a clue. Amara's heart began to beat faster. For the first time since Julian died, she felt something other than sadness. Something small and flickering, like a candle in the darkness. Hope. The bus drove through the night. The rain stopped somewhere around 3 a.m., and the clouds parted to show a sky full of stars. Amara pressed her face against the cold window and watched them sparkle above the dark countryside. She must have fallen asleep, because the next thing she knew, someone was shaking her shoulder. Miss, wake up. This is the last stop." Amara opened her eyes. Gray morning light was streaming through the windows. The bus driver, a large man with a bushy mustache, was standing in the aisle looking down at her. "Lion," she asked groggily. "End of the line," he confirmed. "You need to get off now." Amara grabbed her suitcase and stumbled off the bus. Her body was stiff from sleeping in the uncomfortable seat, and her stomach growled with hunger. She had not eaten anything since breakfast yesterday. She found herself standing in a small town square. It was quiet and old-fashioned, with cobblestone streets and buildings made of worn brick. A church with a tall steeple stood on one corner. A little cafe with outdoor tables sat on another. A few early morning shoppers walked past with bags of bread and vegetables. It was nothing like the big city where she had lived with Julian. No skyscrapers, no fancy cars, no rushing crowds. Everything here moved slowly, like time itself had decided to take a nap. Amara pulled out the papers Mr. Harrison had given her. The address of the building was written at the bottom, 47 Rue de la Soie. She showed the paper to an old man, sitting on a bench nearby. "Excuse me, sir, do you know how to get to this address?" The old man squinted at the paper. His eyes went wide. "Rue de la Soie," he said, "the old Duval building." Amara's heart jumped. "You know it." "Everyone knows it," the old man said. "It used to be the biggest textile factory in the region. The Duval family built it almost 100 years ago, but it closed down long before I was born. Nobody has gone there in years." "How do I get there?" The old man pointed down a narrow street. "Walk that way for about 20 minutes, past the old mill, past the forest edge. You can't miss it. Big building covered in ivy, looks like a haunted castle." He chuckled at his own joke, but Amara did not laugh. Her mind was racing. The Duval family, Julian's family, they had built this place, and then they had abandoned it. Why? What had happened? And why had Julian wanted her to have it? "Thank you," she said to the old man. "Be careful out there," he called after her. "That building hasn't been safe for decades, probably full of holes in the floor and bats in the ceiling." Amara waved without looking back. She was already walking down the narrow street, her suitcase bumping over the cobblestones behind her. 20 minutes. 20 minutes until she found out why Julian had sent her here. 20 minutes until everything changed. The old man was right. The building looked like a haunted castle. It rose up from the ground like a sleeping giant, 4 stories tall and made of dark red bricks that had turned almost black with age. Ivy covered nearly every surface, crawling up the walls and across the broken windows like green fingers trying to pull the building back into the earth. A rusted iron fence surrounded the property, and weeds grew waist-high in what used to be a courtyard. But the strangest thing was the feeling Amara got when she looked at it. It did not feel abandoned. It felt like it was waiting. Amara walked slowly toward the gate. The iron was orange with rust, and the lock had been broken long ago. She pushed, and the gate swung open with a loud screech that sent birds flying from the nearby trees. Her footsteps crunched on the gravel path. The closer she got to the building, the bigger it seemed. Up close, she could see the faded letters carved into the stone above the main door, DUVAL and FILS. TXDILESDE Qualité, Établi 1923. Duval and Sons, Quality Textiles, established 1923. 100 years ago, this place had been alive with workers and machines and bolts of beautiful fabric. Now it was silent as a tomb. Amara tried the front door. It was locked tight, the wood swollen with years of moisture. She walked around the side of the building, looking for another way in. The windows on the first floor were all either boarded up or too high to reach. But then she found it. At the back of the building, half hidden by a wall of ivy, was an iron door. Unlike the front door, this one was not rotted or swollen. In fact, it looked almost new. The metal was clean and the handle was free of rust. Someone had been here recently. Amara's hands were shaking as she reached for the handle. She half expected it to be locked, but when she pulled, the door swung open easily. Inside was darkness. And a smell. A faint, familiar smell that made her heart stop. Incense. The same kind of incense Julian used to burn in his office at home. He said it helped him think. Amara used to tease him about being an old soul stuck in a young man's body. She stepped inside. The hallway was dim, lit only by small cracks of light coming through the boarded windows. Dust floated in the air like tiny ghosts. Amara moved forward slowly, her eyes adjusting to the darkness. The floor was covered with a thick layer of dust, but as she looked closer, she saw something strange. Footprints. Fresh footprints in the dust, leading deeper into the building. And among the dusty prints there were clean spots, places where someone had walked recently, very recently. Amara's breath caught in her throat. Who else had been here? When? Why? She should be scared. A normal person would be scared, alone in an abandoned building with signs that someone else was lurking inside. But Amara was not scared. She was curious. And underneath the curiosity, buried deep in her chest, was something else. A tiny spark of hope that refused to go out. Julian had sent her here for a reason. And she was going to find out what it was. She followed the footprints deeper into the building. The hallway opened into a large room that must have been the main factory floor. Huge machines stood silent and still, covered in white sheets that made them look like sleeping ghosts. Tall windows lined the walls, but most of them were covered with boards, letting in only thin slices of gray light. Amara walked carefully between the machines. Her footsteps echoed in the empty space. The air was cold and damp, and she could see her breath making little clouds in front of her face. The footprints in the dust led her across the factory floor to a narrow staircase in the corner. The stairs went down into darkness. A basement. Amara hesitated. Going down into a dark basement in an abandoned building seemed like a very bad idea. The kind of thing people in scary movies did right before something terrible happened. But the incense smell was stronger here, and the footprints went down those stairs. Whatever Julian wanted her to find, it was down there. She pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. The battery was at 12%. She would have to be quick. The stairs creaked under her feet as she went down. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. The darkness wrapped around her like a cold blanket. The only sound was her own breathing and the tap-tap-tap of her shoes on the wooden steps. At the bottom of the stairs, she found another hallway. This one was shorter, with only one door at the end. The door was made of heavy wood, and it had a large iron lock. But the lock was not closed. It hung open on its hook, like someone had unlocked it and forgotten to take it off. Amara pushed the door open. Her flashlight revealed a small room, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. The walls were made of old stone, and the ceiling was low. In the middle of the room was a wooden desk with a chair pushed up against it. On the desk sat a half-burned candle, a leather notebook, and a single red flower in a small glass vase. Amara's heart stopped. A red camellia. Julian's favorite flower. He had given her a red camellia on their first date. He said it was the flower of true love in some Asian cultures. He said it meant that his heart was devoted to her completely. Every anniversary after that, he gave her a bouquet of red camellias instead of roses. And now, here in this dark basement room, a fresh red camellia sat on a dusty desk. The petals were still soft. The color was still bright. This flower had been placed here very recently. Maybe even in the last few days. Amara's legs felt weak. She grabbed the edge of the desk to steady herself. "Julian," she whispered into the darkness. "Julian, are you here?" No answer, just silence and shadows. She knew it was crazy. Julian was dead. She had seen his body in the hospital. She had watched them lower his coffin into the ground. Dead people did not leave fresh flowers in secret basement rooms. But then who had left this? With trembling hands, Amara picked up the red camellia. Under the vase, she saw something she had not noticed before. A small piece of paper, folded in half. She unfolded it and read the words written in handwriting she knew better than her own. "If I ever leave something for you to find, it will be under a red camellia. You remembered. Now look beneath the flower itself. J." Amara's tears fell onto the paper, smearing the ink. Julian had written this, her Julian. He had planned this probably months ago when he knew he was dying. She set down the paper and picked up the vase again. She had already moved it once, but she had not looked carefully at what was underneath. Now she looked closer. The desk had a thin crack running across its surface. Not a natural crack from old wood, but a straight line, like something had been cut into the wood on purpose. Amara ran her fingers along the crack. She pressed down, and a small section of the desk popped up like a lid. A hidden compartment. Inside the compartment was a small bronze key. It was old but polished, like someone had cleaned it recently. A red ribbon was tied through the hole at the top. Amara held the key up to her flashlight. It was beautiful in a simple way. The kind of key that opened something important. But what? She looked around the room again. There were no other doors, no chests or boxes or safes, just the desk and the chair and the stone walls. Then she remembered the hallway. The door she had come through had an iron lock hanging open, but she had not seen any other doors. Or had she? Amara went back into the hallway and shined her flashlight on the walls. At first, she saw nothing but old stone covered with dust and cobwebs, but then her light caught something strange. A rectangular outline in the wall, so faint she almost missed it. The stones there were slightly different from the ones around them. Newer, maybe, or just placed more carefully. A hidden door. Amara pressed her hand against the stones. Nothing happened. She pushed harder, still nothing. Then she noticed a small hole in one of the stones, a hole just big enough for a key. She inserted the bronze key and turned it. Something clicked deep inside the wall. Then, slowly, the stones swung inward like a door. Behind the hidden door was another room, but this room was different from everything else in the building. It was clean. The floor was swept. The walls were painted a soft cream color. Electric lights hung from the ceiling, and when Amara stepped inside, they flickered on automatically, sensing her movement. The room was set up like a small office. There was a modern desk with a laptop computer on it, a comfortable leather chair, a small refrigerator in the corner, and on the walls, dozens of framed photographs. Amara walked closer to look at the photographs. Her breath caught in her throat. They were pictures of her. Her and Julian on their wedding day, her laughing at a restaurant, her sleeping on the couch with a book on her chest, her walking through a park, looking up at the autumn leaves. Julian had taken all of these pictures. She remembered the moments, but she had never seen the photographs before. He must have kept them secret, saved them for this room. There were other pictures, too. Old black-and-white photographs of people she did not recognize. A serious-looking man with a thick mustache standing in front of this very building. A woman in an old-fashioned dress holding a baby. A group of workers posing proudly beside one of the big machines upstairs. The Duval family, Julian's ancestors, the people who had built this place. Amara sat down in the leather chair. Her head was spinning. This room changed everything. Julian had not abandoned her. He had not forgotten her. He had spent months, maybe years, preparing this place for her. But why? What was she supposed to do now? Her eyes fell on the laptop. It was closed, but a small green light showed that it was on, just sleeping. She opened it. The screen lit up, showing a simple background of a red camellia flower. There were only 2 icons on the desktop. One was labeled, "For my Amara, watch first." The other was labeled, "The truth about everything." Amara's hand shook as she moved the cursor to the first icon. She double-clicked, and a video player opened. Julian's face appeared on the screen. He looked thin, tired. His skin had the pale color she remembered from his last weeks in the hospital, but he was smiling. That same warm, gentle smile she had fallen in love with 6 years ago. "Hello, my love," he said. Amara burst into tears. The video was 37 minutes long. Julian had recorded it in this very room, sitting in this very chair. Behind him, Amara could see some of the photographs on the wall. He was wearing the blue sweater she had given him for his birthday, the one he said was his favorite. "If you're watching this," Julian said, "then I'm gone. And I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth while I was alive. I'm sorry I had to leave you. And I'm sorry for everything you must have gone through to get here." He paused and took a shaky breath. "I know about the will reading. I know what my mother and sister must have said to you. I know they probably threw you out of the house and laughed at you for getting only this old building. That was the plan, Amara. All of it was part of the plan." Amara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Plan? What plan?" "Let me start at the beginning," Julian continued. My family is not what you think. The Duval Foundation, the charity work, the good reputation, it's all a lie. My mother has been stealing from the foundation for years. She takes money that's supposed to help homeless children and hungry families, and she puts it in her own pocket. My sister helps her hide the evidence. Amara felt sick. The Duval Foundation was famous for helping poor people. Julian had worked there for years, organizing food drives and building homeless shelters. Was it all fake? I found out about it 3 years ago, Julian said. I was looking through some old files and I discovered the fraud. My mother was stealing millions of dollars. Millions, Amara. Money that should have gone to people who needed it. His face darkened with anger. I confronted her. I told her I was going to report her to the police, but she laughed at me. She said no one would believe me. She said she had lawyers and connections and ways of making problems disappear. She said if I ever tried to expose her, she would destroy me. Julian's eyes looked directly into the camera, directly at Amara. Then I got sick, and suddenly I didn't have time anymore. I couldn't fight her in public. I couldn't go to the police or the newspapers. I was dying, Amara. Every day I got weaker. Every day I had less time. He smiled sadly. But I didn't give up. I just changed my strategy. Instead of fighting my mother directly, I decided to beat her at her own game. I spent the last 2 years building a trap that she would walk right into, a trap that would take everything from her and give it to the one person she hates most in the world. He leaned closer to the camera. You, my love, you are my revenge. The video continued. Julian explained everything, every detail of his plan, every step he had taken to protect Amara and destroy his family. The Duval Foundation looked rich, but it was actually drowning in debt. Madeline had borrowed millions of dollars to fund her expensive lifestyle, using the foundation's assets as collateral. She thought she could keep borrowing forever because the donations kept coming. But Julian had quietly stopped the donations. Over the past 2 years, he had contacted every major donor and told them the truth about Madeline's stealing. He showed them proof, bank statements, hidden accounts, everything. One by one, the donors had stopped giving money, but they did it quietly on Julian's request. They did not want to cause a scandal. They just wanted to stop being robbed. Without the donations, the foundation started to run out of money. Madeline borrowed more and more, not realizing that she was digging herself deeper into a hole. The mansion, borrowed against. The cars, borrowed against. The fancy apartment in downtown Chicago that Celeste got in the will, borrowed against. Everything Madeline and Celeste thought they owned was actually owned by banks. And in 6 months, when the loans came due, they would lose everything. By this time next year, Julian said with satisfaction, my mother will have nothing, no mansion, no cars, no money, no reputation. The newspapers will find out about her stealing. The police will open an investigation. Everyone who ever respected her will turn their backs. She will be ruined, Amara, completely and totally ruined. He smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had spent years planning his revenge. And you, Julian said, you will have everything. He explained the rest. This building, the old factory in Lyon, was not worthless. It was actually incredibly valuable. The land alone was worth over $40 million, and the building itself, once it was renovated, could be worth even more. But that was not the biggest secret. My grandfather was not just a textile maker, Julian said. He was also a collector. He spent his whole life gathering art, jewelry, rare books, and other treasures. When he died, everyone thought his collection had been sold. But it wasn't. He hid it, right here in this building, in rooms that nobody knows about except me. Amara's mouth fell open. I've spent the last 2 years finding everything and cataloging it, Julian continued. There are paintings worth millions, jewelry that belonged to queens and princesses, first edition books that museums would kill for. All of it is yours now, Amara, all of it. He paused and looked at her with love in his eyes. But the most valuable thing I'm leaving you is not the art or the jewelry. It's Mason Duval. Amara Amara frowned. Mason Duval. She had never heard that name before. While my mother was running her fake charity, I was building something real, Julian explained. A company. A real company that makes beautiful things and treats its workers fairly. I called it Mason Duval, after my grandfather's original business. It started small, but over the last few years it has grown. We make luxury fabrics and sell them to the biggest fashion houses in the world. Last year, we made over $60 million in profit. $60 million. Amara could not even imagine that much money. I kept it completely secret, Julian said. My mother doesn't know it exists. My sister doesn't know. Nobody knows except me, my lawyer in Paris, and now you. The company is registered in France, and 100% of it belongs to you, Amara. Not to my family, not to anyone else, just you. He leaned back in his chair and took a deep breath. I know this is a lot to take in. I know you must have 1,000 questions. That's why I prepared everything for you. On this laptop, you'll find documents explaining all of it. Bank accounts, property deeds, company records, everything. My lawyer in Paris is named Etienne Morel. He has been helping me for years, and he will help you too. You can trust him completely. Julian's eyes filled with tears. I wish I could be there with you, my love. I wish I could see your face when you discover everything. I wish I could hold your hand and tell you it's going to be okay. He wiped his eyes. But I can't. So instead, I'll tell you this, I have always loved you. From the first moment I saw you, I knew you were special. Not because you were beautiful, though you are. Not because you were smart, though you are. But because you have a good heart, Amara. The best heart I've ever known. You deserve everything I'm giving you, and I know you'll use it well. He smiled one last time. Go to Paris, my love. Find Etienne. Start your new life. And when you walk along the Seine at sunset, remember that I'm there with you. I'll always be there with you. The video ended. Amara sat in the silence, tears streaming down her face. Outside, the wind blew through the old building, making the walls creak and groan. She had come here expecting nothing, a broken building full of rats and dust. Instead, she had found everything. A fortune, a company, a future, and a love that reached beyond death. For a long time, Amara did not move. She just sat in the chair, staring at the blank screen, trying to make sense of everything she had just learned. Her husband was not the weak, foolish man his family thought he was. He was a genius, a planner, a man who had spent years building an empire in secret while pretending to be ordinary. And he had done it all for her. Finally, Amara wiped her face and took a deep breath. Crying would not help anyone. Julian had given her a gift, but it was up to her to use it. She clicked on the second icon, the truth about everything. A folder opened, filled with hundreds of files. Documents, spreadsheets, photographs, videos. Everything was neatly organized and labeled. Bank accounts and access codes. Mason Duval Company documents. Property deeds and valuations. Grandfather's collection inventory. Evidence against Madeleine Duval. Instructions for Etienne Morel. Amara spent the next 3 hours reading through the files. The more she read, the more amazed she became. The bank accounts contained over $12 million in cash. The property deeds showed that she owned not just this building, but 3 other properties in France. The inventory of her grandfather's collection listed over 2,000 items, with an estimated total value of $93 million. And the evidence against Madeleine was devastating. Bank transfers, fake receipts, forged signatures, secret accounts in Switzerland. It was enough to send her to prison for decades. By the time Amara finished reading, the sun was starting to set. Golden light came through the small window near the ceiling, turning the room warm and soft. She was exhausted, hungry, overwhelmed. But she was also alive in a way she had not felt in months, maybe years. Julian had believed in her. He had trusted her with everything he had. Now it was time to prove that his trust was not misplaced. She opened the refrigerator in the corner. Inside, she found a bottle of water and a protein bar. Julian had thought of everything, even leaving her something to eat. She also found an envelope, taped to the inside of the refrigerator door. Inside the envelope was a plain ticket. First class, Paris, France, departure, tomorrow morning 6:15 a.m. The ticket was in her name. A phone number was written on the back of the ticket with a French country code. Below it, in Julian's handwriting, "Call when you land. Etienne will be waiting. J." Amara held the ticket against her chest. Paris. She was going to Paris. She had never been to France before. She had never even left the country. The idea seemed impossible, like something from a fairy tale. But then again, this whole day felt like a fairy tale. The secret room, the hidden treasure, the video message from her dead husband. None of it seemed real. And yet it was. All of it was real. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a text message from an unknown number with a French country code. Madame Duval, Julian prepared everything. Come to Paris. Bring only identification. We are waiting. The word "we" made her nervous. Who else was waiting? How many people knew about Julian's secret? But she pushed the fear aside. Julian trusted these people. That meant she could trust them too. She looked around the room one more time. At the photographs on the walls, at the laptop on the desk, at the small vase with the red camellia. "Thank you, Julian," she whispered. "I won't let you down." Then she closed the laptop, picked up the plane ticket, and walked out of the secret room. She had a plane to catch. Chapter 3, The Flight to Paris. The taxi driver looked at Amara strangely when she climbed into his car. She knew why. She was a mess. Her clothes were still damp from yesterday's rain. Her hair was tangled and dirty. Her face was puffy from crying. She looked like a homeless person, not someone with a first-class ticket to Paris. "Airport, please," she said, trying to sound confident. The driver shrugged. "You got it, lady." The drive took 45 minutes. Amara spent the whole time looking out the window, watching the countryside turn into suburbs, then suburbs turn into the city. Somewhere out there, Madeline and Celeste were waking up in their stolen mansion, thinking they had won. They had no idea what was coming. At the airport, Amara paid the driver with the last of her cash. She walked through the automatic doors and found herself in a bright, busy terminal. People rushed past her with suitcases and briefcases, talking on phones and checking departure boards. Amara felt very small, very alone, very out of place. She found the first-class check-in counter and showed her ticket. The woman behind the counter raised an eyebrow at Amara's appearance, but typed something into her computer. "Ah, yes, Mrs. Duval," the woman said. Her voice suddenly became warm and friendly. "Everything has been arranged for you. Please follow me." Amara blinked. "Arranged?" "Yes, ma'am. You have access to our VIP lounge, and a personal assistant will help you through security. Is there anything else you need?" Amara did not know what to say. She had never been treated like this before. At the Duval mansion, she was always the unwanted guest, the poor girl who married above her station. Nobody ever offered her special treatment. I think I'm okay," she stammered. The woman smiled. "Very well, right this way, please." Amara followed her through a special door, past the long lines of regular passengers. A young man in a uniform took her suitcase and led her to a private screening area where she did not have to remove her shoes or stand in a machine. Then he brought her to a beautiful lounge with soft couches, free food, and a view of the runway. He showed her to a private room where she could shower and change. "Mr. Duval arranged for some items to be delivered for you," the young man said. "They're in the closet." Amara opened the closet door and gasped. Inside were brand new clothes, a beautiful cream-colored cashmere sweater, dark navy pants that looked exactly her size, a soft gray coat for the cold Paris weather, new underwear still in packages, even a pair of elegant leather boots. And on the shelf above, a small makeup bag with everything she needed to look presentable. Julian had planned all of this. Weeks ago, maybe months ago, he had arranged for these clothes to be here, waiting for her, ready for the day she finally discovered his secret. Amara's eyes filled with tears again. But this time, she smiled through them. "You really did think of everything," she whispered. She showered quickly, washing away the dirt and sadness of the past 2 days. The hot water felt like a blessing on her tired muscles. When she stepped out and dried herself with the fluffy towel, she felt like a different person. She put on the new clothes. They fit perfectly. Julian knew her size better than she did. She brushed her hair and put on a little makeup. Nothing fancy, just enough to hide the dark circles under her eyes and add some color to her pale cheeks. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She did not look like a poor widow thrown out in the rain. She looked like someone who mattered, someone who belonged. The flight to Paris was 7 hours long. Amara had never flown first class before. She had never flown at all, actually. Julian had always traveled for work, but she had stayed home. "I'll take you to Paris someday," he used to say. "We'll walk along the Seine and eat croissants and pretend we're in a movie." Now she was going to Paris alone, and Julian would never walk anywhere again. But as Amara settled into her wide, comfortable seat, she did not feel sad. She felt something new, something strange. She felt ready. A flight attendant brought her a glass of orange juice and a warm towel for her hands. Another attendant explained how the seat converted into a bed if she wanted to sleep. A third attendant brought her a menu with choices of meals she could not even pronounce. Amara chose something with chicken and vegetables. It turned out to be the best food she had ever tasted. As the plane took off and the ground fell away beneath her, Amara pressed her face to the window like a child seeing snow for the first time. The city got smaller and smaller. The houses became dots. The streets became lines. The rivers became ribbons. Then the clouds swallowed everything, and there was only white. Amara leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. For the first time in months, she did not feel scared. She did not feel hopeless. She did not feel like a burden or a mistake or a worthless woman who did not deserve to be loved. She felt like herself, finally, truly, completely herself. Julian had given her this, not just the money and the company and the secret treasure. He had given her back something she had lost during the years of Madeline's cruelty. He had given her back her belief in herself. Amara must have slept, because when she opened her eyes, the plane was descending. Through the window, she could see a new city spread out below her. A gray city with old buildings and wide streets and a river cutting through the middle like a silver snake. Paris. Her heart started beating faster. The plane landed smoothly, and Amara followed the other first-class passengers through a special exit. The Paris airport was huge and confusing, with signs in French that she could not read. But somehow, she made it through customs without any problems. The officer looked at her passport, looked at her face, and waved her through with a bored expression. She collected her small suitcase and walked toward the exit. Her legs were shaking. Her mouth was dry. She had never felt so scared and excited at the same time. The automatic doors opened, and she stepped into the arrival hall. People everywhere. Hundreds of people holding signs, waving at passengers, hugging loved ones. Families reuniting. Business people meeting. Tour groups gathering. Amara stood frozen, overwhelmed by the noise and the movement and the strangeness of it all. Then she saw him. A tall man in a dark gray coat, standing perfectly still in the middle of the chaos. He had silver hair and a calm face, and he held a small electronic tablet in his hands. On the tablet, in glowing letters, were 3 words. Madame Amara Duval. Their eyes met across the crowded hall. The man smiled and nodded. Amara walked toward him on legs that felt like water. Each step seemed to take forever. The noise around her faded. The people became blurs. There was only the man with the tablet and the 3 words that meant her whole life was about to change. When she reached him, the man bowed slightly. "Madame Duval," he said in a gentle voice with a French accent. "I am Etienne Morel, your husband's attorney. Welcome to Paris." Amara opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She just stood there, staring at him, trying not to cry. Etienne's smile grew warmer. "I know this must be overwhelming," he said kindly. "Julian told me everything. He wanted me to tell you something." "What?" Amara whispered. Etienne reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a single red camellia. "He wanted me to tell you that your true inheritance begins now." Etienne led Amara outside, where a sleek black car was waiting. A driver in a uniform opened the back door for her, and she slid onto soft leather seats that smelled like money. Etienne sat beside her, and the driver pulled away from the curb. "We have much to discuss, Madame," Etienne said. "But first, I think you need some rest. I am taking you to your apartment." "My apartment," Amara said. "Yes, Julian purchased it 3 years ago. He furnished it himself, chose everything with you in mind. No one has ever stayed there. It has been waiting for you." Amara looked out the window at the Paris streets rolling past. Old stone buildings with iron balconies. Sidewalk cafes with people drinking coffee. Trees dropping golden leaves onto cobblestone streets. It was beautiful, like a painting come to life. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "Why did Julian do all of this? Why didn't he just tell me?" Etienne was silent for a moment. "Your husband loved you very much, Madame, but he was also a practical man. He knew his family. He knew what they were capable of. If he had told you the truth while he was alive, they would have found out. They would have tried to stop him. To steal everything before you could get it." He turned to look at her with serious eyes. "By keeping the secret, he protected you. He made sure that when his family tried to destroy you, they would only destroy themselves. It was the greatest gift he could give." Amara thought about this. It made sense in a sad way. Madeline and Celeste would have done anything to get Julian's money. If they had known about the secret company, the hidden treasure, the true value of the Lion building, they would have fought tooth and nail. Instead, they got exactly what they wanted, and what they wanted would ruin them. "What happens now?" Amara asked. Etienne pulled a folder from his briefcase. "Now, Madame, we begin. You are the sole owner of Mason Duval, a company worth approximately $250 million. You own 4 properties in France, including the building in Lyon. You have access to bank accounts containing over $12 million, and you are the legal heir to an art collection valued at nearly $100 million. He handed her the folder. "All of this is yours. Legally, completely yours. Your mother-in-law has no claim to any of it. She does not even know it exists." Amara flipped through the papers. Numbers swam before her eyes. Millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. 3 days ago, she had been thrown out into the rain with nothing. Now she was one of the richest women in France. "I don't know how to run a company," she said, her voice small. "I don't know anything about art or property or any of this." Etienne smiled. "That is why you have me, Madame, and a team of excellent people who have been preparing for this day for years. You do not need to know everything. You only need to learn, and I have a feeling you are a very fast learner." The car turned onto a bridge, and suddenly the Eiffel Tower appeared in the distance. It rose up against the gray sky like a giant iron flower, exactly as beautiful as all the photographs Amara had ever seen. She felt tears sting her eyes, not sad tears this time, wonder tears. "Julian wanted you to see this," Etienne said softly. "He told me to make sure I drove you this way. He said you had always dreamed of seeing the Eiffel Tower." Amara nodded, unable to speak. Julian had remembered. Even in his last months, planning his great revenge, preparing for his death, he had remembered her silly little dream about seeing Paris. He had loved her, really, truly loved her, more than she had ever known. "Thank you, Julian," she whispered to the window. "Thank you for everything." The car crossed the bridge and continued into the heart of the city. And somewhere in the distance, the Eiffel Tower watched over them like an old friend, welcoming them home.